Count Roger of Sicily lifted his leg and farted. "By the truth of my religion," he exclaimed, "there is more use in that than in what you have to say." His advisers stood chastened and a little perplexed. The count before them was in his late 40s, and salted to his bones with the experience of military campaigning in southern Italy and the islands of the central Mediterranean. As a young warrior, he had been described by one flatterer as tall and well-made, a most fluent speaker, shrewd in counsel, far-sighted in the planning of things to be done, cheerful and pleasant to everyone. In middle age, he had hardened somewhat, and was not one to waste his words on fools. The plan the advisers had recommended had seemed like a good one, as courtiers' plans very often do before they are shredded by the critiques of short-tempered potentates. Not far across the sea from Sicily, roughly 75 miles or 120 kilometres at the closest point, lay the remains of what had, in ancient times, been called Carthage, afterwards the Roman province of Africa, and now, in the late 11th century, Ifriqiya. Its cities, including the capital Mahdia on the coast and Kairouan inland, where a vast mosque and school had for many generations been frequented by the greatest philosophers and natural scientists in North Africa, were under the shaky command of a crumbling dynasty of Berber Muslims known as the Zirids. The countryside was controlled by various Arab Bedouin tribes sent from Egypt to drive the Zirids out. Political stability was collapsing. Here lay warm and fertile farmlands, there sat prosperous port towns. All ripe for the taking? Roger's counsellors thought so, and they had therefore recommended to their testy overlord the proposal of a cousin whom one source names only as Baldwin. This Baldwin had come into possession of a great army of Christian soldiers, and was casting around for somewhere godless to conquer. He had asked Roger's blessing to come to Sicily and use it as a launch pad for an invasion of Ifriqiya. "I shall be a neighbour of yours," he had exclaimed, as though this were good news. But Roger of Sicily was not feeling neighbourly. Ifriqiya was undoubtedly ruled by various followers of Islam, he said, but those infidels happened to be sworn partners of the Sicilians in agreements that kept the peace and allowed for a rich exchange of goods in the island's markets and ports. The last thing he wanted, he ranted to his gathered minions, was a cousin imposing on his hospitality, waging a reckless war that would disrupt Sicilian trade if it was successful, and cost him a lot of money in military support if it failed. Ifriqiya may indeed have been vulnerable, but if anyone was going to exploit that, it was going to be Roger himself. He had spent the last 2.5 decades, almost his entire adult life, carving out his rule in the region, and it would have been a limp end indeed if he were now to put it at risk in pursuit of some hare-brained scheme cooked up by a kinsman who had never troubled the soil of the island with his sweat. If this Baldwin wanted to fight Muslims, said Roger, he would have to find a different part of the Mediterranean in which to go about his business. There were plenty of places he could name that would be preferable to Sicily's backyard. He summoned Baldwin's personal envoy to his presence and informed him of his decision. If his master were really serious, he said, then the best way to proceed is to conquer Jerusalem. And that is how it all began.